in attendance that with the partnership of WCTV, tonight's meeting is being recorded, and we'll make sure that we can make this available in the future to residents of the community who aren't able to be here. For those that don't know me, my name is Glenn Brand, and I have the privilege to serve as the superintendent of the Wilmington Public Schools. This is a rather unconventional meeting tonight, so bear with us, bear with me as I try my best to work through this, but hopefully that it will be a fruitful opportunity to learn more about this important juncture that we think we're at for the community of Wilmington. We are identifying this meeting tonight as the joint meeting of the Wilmington Select Board, the Wilmington Finance Committee, the Wilmington School Committee, and the Wildwood School Building Committee. And with that, I'd like to call respectively this meeting to order this evening. We are going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance and then do our best to go through roll call. Minutes are being taken tonight and for the public, and so patience certainly as we try and work through that. But if we could begin to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And we will start with the Select Board. Again, if we could go through the formal process of calling their respective meetings to order for these committees, and then we believe it would be appropriate to go through a roll call vote, again, for the purposes of the minutes. So the Select Board.
I'd like a motion to open up the meeting by the Board of Selectmen.
Someone.
Do I hear a second? Second. All those in favor?
If you
Will pop.
All.
Willing, selling.
Kevin Geiger, yes. Brian Points, yes. David Farmer, yes. Greg Bed was running a little behind, but he will be here.
Thank you very much. Next, going in order of the agenda to the Finance Committee.
Now, it's my understanding that the Finance Committee does not have a quorum at the moment, so in the absence of a quorum, certainly members are free to be here, but would not be able to convene your meeting or take any votes, essentially being here as members of the public.
Okay. With that, we're moving on to the School Committee. Mr. Ragsdale.
All aware of the school committee on May 31st, fixing seating. To roll call, Jen Bryson, Jason Maha,
Yes.
and Lynn Burns,
Yes.
Stephen Turner,
Yes.
Jessica Donnelly,
Yes.
Mike McCauley, yes, and Dave Brad's also present.
Great, thank you. And lastly, the Wildwood School Building Committee. We'll definitely need your patience for this, as this is a large group. I do serve as the chair myself of the Wildwood School Building Committee. So looking to call this meeting this evening, Wednesday, May 31st, to order. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Hooper, second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call. Vote. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Ms. Inman? Yes. Mr. Kyra? Here. Mr. Ragsdale?
Here.
Mr. Hooper? Here. Mr. Ruggiero? Here. Mr. Perry? Ms. Sclezzo?
Here.
Ms. Allen?
Here.
Mr. Holloway? Yep. Ms. Melarage? Mr. Melarage, sorry. Mr. Minor?
here.
Thank you. Ms. Lopez?
Here.
Ms. Barbedian?
Here.
Is it Michael? Sorry, your last name? Michael. Thank you, Michael. Sorry. Ms. Prendergast? Justin, is it Coos? Couchet, thank you. I'll get that. Ms. Holloran?
Here.
Ms. Scott? Here. Ms. Bissell? Here. Ms. Brown-Legrand is absent, and Mr. Bendel, we know, is not here yet this evening. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we will, with that, continue on through the agenda tonight. We obviously have lots of information to share through a presentation we'll get to in just a moment, but maybe first to start, I'd like to introduce members of both our designer, the town's designer for this project. We'll allow them to introduce themselves in a second. And then our owner's project manager, where's Julie? Where did she go? Here as well, too. So perhaps I'll have them introduce themselves first. Then I have a few things to share sort of some opening remarks, and then we'll get right into the presentation tonight. Lee?
Good evening. I'm Lee Dorr. I'm a principal at Dorr and Whittier Architects.
Hi there. My name is Ronnie Phillip. I'm project manager with Dorr and Whittier Architects.
Good evening. I'm Julie Leduc. I'm the Director of Owners Project Management Services for SMMA.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jason Boone. I'm an educational facility planner with Dorr and Whittier Architects.
Hey there, I'm Don Walter, principal with Dorr and Whittier Architects.
Thank you all, and thanks for being here tonight. So collectively, for all in attendance, we do appreciate your time and support as we prepare to take the next steps as a school community and wider community of Wilmington in an effort to support the teaching and learning environments for our elementary children and perhaps beyond elementary children in this district for decades to come. Just some background information here in an effort to try and make sure that everyone is as up to speed as possible with this. We recognize there's an awful lot of information to take in regarding this project. Many of us have the advantage of having worked through and thought through a lot of this recently, but we know that that's not true for everyone here in this room. Just to remind everyone, the town of Wilmington submitted what's called statements of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the spring of 2020, just as the pandemic arrived. Communities such as ours are allowed to submit statement of interest for all schools, whether that or an individual school, such as we did a number of years back for the school that we're sitting in this evening. We express an interest in partnering with the MSBA in a potential building project, whether that be new school construction or renovation. As a result of both the overall needs of each and every one of our 6 elementary schools in the district pre-K to 5, and as a result of the findings of the recommendations of the 2018 Facilities Master Plan, we submitted 6 statement of interests for all 6 elementary schools with the support of the Select Board and the school committee at the time. That was necessary in order to submit those statement of interests to the MSBA. This clearly conveyed to the MSBA our interest in a community of exploring possible school consolidation. But we also had to indicate to the MSBA which possibilities of consolidation we were considering and most interested in exploring and studying. Because of this, we only focused on the pre-K to 5 level. Over the course of the last few months, the town has secured the services of both our owner's project manager as well as our designer, Dorr and Whittier. Our working group, inclusive of Mr. Hall, Mr. Hooper, Mr. Ruggiero, myself, and the respective members of our teams of the OPM and our designer, have been meeting regularly to prepare for the ramp-up of the next phase of the project with the MSBA. But recently, what has become a more central point of our deliberations and discussions has been the consideration of what has changed for our community since our original submission of our plan to MSBA 4 years ago. As a working group, we collectively came to the realization that before proceeding, we believe we needed to exercise due diligence and explore whether or not there could or should be an effort by our community to reach back out to the MSBA to modify our original proposal. We also believe that it was important to provide the boards that are here this evening, respectively, with the information at the same time so that all could become informed at this, what we believe to be a fairly critical juncture of the project. One final point to share, as outlined in the memo that you received recently, is the degree of urgency that has been conveyed to us about this, and that urgency has come from the MSBA themselves in terms of the submission of the information should we be interested in moving forward as a community at the end of June. So it is clear to me and many here the undoubtable questions from some around what has changed in the last 4 years. I think that there are some key things that have changed. First off, our overall district population, student population or enrollment at the time of submission of the SOIs back in 2020 was 3,166 students. And that was in the 2019-2020 school year. And I'm taking this data from the Department of Education's website. This year, our overall enrollment has reflected a decline of 380 students from the year 2020, and now sits at 2,786. In addition, with the assistance of our partner, Dorr and Whittier, who has been working with the community over the last couple of years to explore a possible solution to the Wildwood School in the event that that facility ever needed to close, We recognize the irony certainly in that. They identified in a more focused way the actual capacity that some of our schools, particularly the middle school and high school, have, as what now could rightly be deemed underutilized space. These two factors combined have been aligned with what I know to be the interest of some perhaps in the community of exploring whether or not we could or should integrate, even if we can, the 8th grade into the high school, and or better utilize the capacity in these two schools at large. Tonight's presentation will provide much more information to you and our community in terms of where we're at in this critical juncture and why it is that we're here tonight to consider a possible change in course. Let me just, if I may, though, before they begin, talk a little bit about the 8th grade, because through our working group that I mentioned before, it has become indeed a pivotal component of this overall thinking. And I just think that I would ask you to just keep that in mind. Because as you'll see in this presentation, there is an awful lot riding on this particular piece of consideration. I'll start by saying that I don't know, nor can I myself determine with my team whether or not the 8th grade, current as well as future enrollment projections, can actually fit in the Wilmington High School. They're completely different programs, that is the middle school and the high school, and capacity alone does not necessarily mean we can properly operate both programs in this school. We may be able to, but we don't know. Second, even on paper, with the assistance of experts in the field who can analyze space capacity and determine that, in fact, two mutually different programs could, in fact, fit in this school, we don't know whether the community at large would want that or whether they would support that. And finally, third, those communities that I'm aware of that transition to a structure that includes the 8th grade in the high school, to my knowledge, have done so when they actually construct and plan a school facility that can appropriately support and accommodate students in 8th through 12th grade. Case in point, down the road, Bill Ricca. Their new high school was designed for that. Tonight, as you'll learn and as we can discuss later, what is really being asked of you and in turn the community to consider, simply stated, we're trying to get a sense as to whether or not we should ask the permission of the Massachusetts School Building Authority to alter the enrollment options that the town of Wilmington should study and can study as part of our project. With that, I'll turn it over.
Thanks. I'm going to turn it over to Ronnie to walk us through a little information and background for you tonight. And after the presentation, we're happy to answer questions as they arise.
Thank you. And I'm there. You might turn the lights tonight. Thank you. So after the introductions, we will summarize the MSBA process, review current and proposed options, and the impacts they can have on the schedule.
The town of Wilmington and the school committee have partnered with the MSBA to pursue a project centered around the Wildwood Early Childhood Center. The SBC was formed and proceeded to procure the project team, SMMA as the OPM, Dora Whittier as the project designer. The MSBA grant program involves a detailed process. It is divided into 8 modules as shown on the screen. Each module is a checkpoint with the MSBA before proceeding to the next phase. Wilmington has completed the first 2 modules and is currently in Module 3, Feasibility Study. Overall, the process can take approximately 7 years. In Module 1, a design enrollment was agreed upon with the MSBA. For Wilmington, multiple design enrollments were approved. The next several slides will walk you through those options. As we discuss the options, a single black outline will represent an existing building to remain. A bold outline denotes a major project, and a dashed outline indicates possible discontinuation of a location for educational use. The original statement of interest prioritized the Wildwood Early Childhood Center. We are required to review renovation to the existing building. We will also study additions to a renovated building and new construction options. This option maintains status quo for Wilmington. Although the statement of interest submitted was for Wildwood, Wilmington had the foresight to include the other elementary school populations on the north side of town for MSBA consideration. This resulted in 2 additional design enrollments. The first was for a pre-K-3, consolidating Wildwood and Woburn schools on one site. We will look at renovations with additions, as well as all new construction options to serve the larger population. The site not selected could be retired from educational use, but used as fields or for another purpose. This option would reduce a transition for students at the elementary level and address needs of 2 schools with 1 project. A pre-K-5 design enrollment was approved, consolidating the 3 elementary schools on the north side of town. We will look at ad reno and new construction options at each of the sites for this population. With a pre-K-5 consolidation on the north side of town, Wilmington is addressing 3 of their 6 aging elementary facilities with 1 project and eliminating transitions at the elementary level. This is not new information for many of you, but during the initial phases with the MSBA, the oil spill occurred at the Wildwood site. Doran Whittier assisted the district in exploring interim solutions for the Wildwood students and staff. During this exploration, existing capacities within the school buildings highlighted the potential for alternate solutions. We want to take a quick step back to talk a little more about the big picture in Wilmington, a district with 6 elementary schools, a middle school, and a high school, many of which at the elementary level have physical and educational needs. It's this big picture, almost master planning in nature, that this project makes it a little different than other MSBA projects. In our work over the last year, for example, our analysis suggested that there is a mismatch between the capacities of the district's facilities and their projected enrollments. What you're seeing in this graphic is the current usage of each facility expressed as a percentage of the available capacity. Red represents an overcapacity condition, yellow represents an at-capacity condition, and green indicates a below-capacity condition. There appears to be more than enough capacity in the district, but it's in all the wrong places. While a single project in Wilmington isn't likely to resolve everything all at once, it's one piece of data that suggests this project should be considered through the lens of the entire district, rather than a simple replacement of a single early childhood center. It could be the key to right-sizing the project, to managing the affordability of the project to the community, and to selecting a grade configuration. Speaking of grade configurations, our recent work in Wilmington also identified a challenge associated with how the existing elementary schools are organized. They are organized into west and north catchment areas, separated essentially by Route 38. Each area contains sequential elementary schools organized by grade groupings rather than by neighborhood. This means the youngest students in the district transition through 3 buildings in their elementary years, and it means that enrollment fluctuations are difficult to manage. As multiple needs exist across the district, the most likely path to community support is developing and communicating a well-thought-out plan, even if the plan requires more than one step. Currently, the MSBA has approved the pre-KK design enrollment at the Wildwood site, maintaining the district's current grade configuration. A pre-K-3 design enrollment on the north side of town consolidates 2 of the elementary schools, eliminating a transition at the elementary level. However, this does not address the needs for pre-K-3 students west of Route 38. Since no schools on the west side of town are currently under consideration for this project, it would likely be necessary to complete a similar project in the future. A pre-K-5 solution consolidates the 3 elementary schools, eliminating transitions at the elementary level. In the long term, this potential solution resolves both the capacity mismatch and the number of elementary school transitions. Consolidation of elementary schools from 6 to 2 essentially locates one facility in each of the 2 parts of town.
It would likely be necessary to complete this plan in 2 steps, potentially over the next 15 plus years if participating in the MSBA program. You may be wondering, what about all that capacity in existing buildings mentioned earlier? In looking at the project through the lens of the entire district, the high school and middle school also have some capacity due to projected decline in enrollment. Wilmington could utilize the space at the high school for the 8th grade if deemed educationally appropriate through the feasibility study phase. This would provide an opportunity for 5th grade to move up to the middle school, and consolidation of the elementary schools as a pre-K 4. This would impact the 3 schools already under consideration in the design enrollments approved by MSBA. To take this one step further, a district-wide pre-K 4 school could address all 6 elementary schools with one project. A pre-K 4 gives Wilmington an additional choice of options to consider in 2 steps. Or in one district-wide solution. Similarly, a district-wide pre-K 5 solution can complement the pre-K 5 design enrollment already approved for the study. The study can review a pre-K 5, which in the long term is 2 steps for the district, or 1. With the potential for additional pre-K 4 design enrollments and a pre-K 5 district-wide option as part of the study, Wilmington can consider reducing the current options. The pre-K 3 option does not fully address the district needs in terms of capacity and transitions, and can request it be removed from the design enrollments for the feasibility study. Changes to the design enrollment will impact the schedule. If Wilmington chooses to expand the options for the study, MSBA would place the project back in eligibility phase while it reconsiders the possible enrollments. This may result in a 6-month delay from the original schedule if the project is approved to move forward by the MSBA board meeting this October. With new information since the SOI was submitted, Wilmington has the opportunity to request additional design enrollments for consideration by MSBA. Any option beyond a pre-K project will impact the entire town in one or multiple phases. There is opportunity to utilize existing capacity within existing buildings, but we don't know the extent unless we study it. What is the best fit for Wilmington? Exploring additional options will provide more choices to make an informed decision. In summary, the pre-K and pre-K 5 options would remain. The pre-K 4 North only and district-wide pre-K 4 and pre-K 5 are additional options for consideration, and the pre-K 3 option can be eliminated as it does not fully meet the district goals. I'll turn it back to Glenn if he has any comments that he wants to make, or...
Thanks, Ronnie. Thank you so much. So we, unless the team wants to add anything further, again, we recognize there's an awful lot of information in this presentation and all to consider. Before we open up to questions, and we'll, if the lights could, we can have the lights come back up a little bit. But again, thanks to the partnership of WCTV, who's recording. I think most are aware it's always better if we can use the microphones. If you have questions, then there's 3 around the room to the extent that that's able to be helpful for the audio. But so again, lots of things to consider here. I think it's just important to point out that where we're at in the process right now means that we have a couple of options. And one is that we, as a community, don't do anything. And we continue on the course that we are on in the program that we are in and continue with every phase of the program going forward. That most certainly is an option. And again, we want to underscore that very thing. The other is, as has been mentioned through presentation, is to indicate to the MSBA that we may wish to expand what is studied, what's explored. keeping in mind that for anything that's explored or anything that's studied, there is no one single entity other than the town who will ultimately decide the fate of a future project, whatever that looks like. And so I think that that's important to keep in mind. Again, depending on the direction that we go here and the sense going forward. I think the one thing to add is, as was the case back in the original submission of the statement of interests in 2020, it's our understanding, or my understanding, that in order to go back to the MSBA, the town manager, the school committee, the chair of the school committee, and the superintendent of schools has to collectively, and Julie can correct me if I'm wrong, or Lee, sign that document that would again indicate to the MSBA that we would like some reconsideration of our original submission. But with that, I'll pause there, and I'm not sure, Jeff, if you have anything you'd want to add.
Just that I think it's important where we are in the stage of the process, that this is an opportunity to take a look at options that we really hadn't focused on previously. One of my expectations, quite honestly, is when we get to the point, if we proceed down the current course with the three options as described, that there will likely be a question asked as to whether the town looked at the existing buildings, primarily the middle school and the high school, as opportunities to use existing space that is already available. And from my perspective, I'd like to have the answer to that question and be able to respond that yes, in fact, we did evaluate those options, whether the 8th to the high school or the 5th to the middle school made sense, not only from a space and enrollment standpoint, but an educational standpoint, as opposed to having to say, no, we really didn't look at those options. So I think for me, that's one of the reasons why I believe serious consideration should be given to adding those options to the mix.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, this is the comments certainly open it up to questions. Because MJ, I think I saw your...
Oh, I was going to just talk one. That's what I hope I do. So this isn't a new conversation for our school district, and it was had well over a decade ago about consolidating our elementary schools due to the transitions and the impact it has with regression between schools over the summer of our kids. So I think with that question for me is where I sit, I think this would definitely be a project, and in the long run would save a municipality more money. There are questions in consideration of the summary of options. I'm hesitant about pre-K to 4, and I know in the conversation initially just up when we were building this high school, this came up in that conversation as well with regards to child development and having these wide range of ages mixed in one facility, the youngest with the rambunctious ones, so to speak. I do think, and I guess I would like to understand, at that time, we were discussing building a new preschool and perhaps combining Bowell and Wildwood together at that time and consolidating some of the grades, and in addition for Shawsheen, in addition for Wildwood to consolidate. I just, perhaps this feasibility study may bring that into the conversation. But I also think too, in looking at these options, I need to know, hypothetically, where in Wilmington could we potentially have buildings to meet the size of the building as well as the outdoor space our students need. A little concerned with actually where would we be able to house something of that size, and that's going to be a huge piece to the puzzle, I think, as we move forward with what option we decide.
Sure, it's a very good question, and we have the same questions ourselves. And that's partially the reason for the request to MSBA to allow us to reconsider options for us to study as a community to see what makes sense. We don't know there's a couple of different sites that the town owns currently that have some space available and could potentially fit these, but we don't know until we go through the process to do some site test fits, develop the programs for the different rate configurations we're looking at, and look at the sites available to us at town, whether they're existing buildings or whether they're sites that aren't used by schools right now. So part of the process that we're requesting to go through is to be able to answer that question. Is there a site in town that could hold the entire enrollment for the town's elementary schools? And is it in a location that's feasible?
Will you be going back? I believe Doria Whittier also did this study previously. Will you be reviewing that if we are able to go before the MSBA with the previous? I know that we had these scenarios come up. Forgive me, I don't know this specificity of what we saw. Or will you be reviewing that as a starting ground as opposed to creating it from?
We'll certainly be able to look at all of the historical information that's been collected up to this point, and we're also going to look at current information and other options that could be available to the town within sites. So effectively, we're asking MSBA to allow us as a community to get that answer on all of these new options. We don't have the answer, and we're not saying that ultimately that will be the solution that you would want to move forward with, but we're looking for the opportunity to give you choices. And if we didn't make this change, we're going to be stuck with the three options that we're already signed up for, which is pre-K, pre-K to 3 doesn't solve the transition problems really at all, and pre-K to 5 just on the north side of town. So if you look at just those options and say, well, replacing Wildwood in kind with another pre-K, does that solve the long-term solutions of the district? Probably not from what we've talked about so far. And we had that same sentiment when we looked at pre-K to 3. It does reduce one of the transitions, but there's still 3 transitions at the elementary level, which is a lot. So we didn't feel that one necessarily would serve the best needs of the community looking forward. So that's why we were asking for a couple of different viewpoints. We do know there's capacity in the buildings. Whether it's appropriate capacity or not, we don't know. Again, we're asking to study that, to be able to bring that back to the community and say, does this make sense? And part of that work at the high school and middle school is we know that enrollment is down now, but we also need to think of the future, right? If that goes back up, right, we don't want to paint ourselves into a corner. So part of analyzing that option will be looking at future enrollment growth, the capacities, where do you have some wiggle room within the district? And do we create wiggle room as part of this project? So those are all questions that we're looking to be answered. And we won't have that opportunity unless we make this ask of MSBA.
Very good. Thank you very much.
If you would, thank you. Sorry. Suppose they could go portable and move them.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't care. Is it on? Thank you all for being here for this presentation. It's helpful. So I have concerns. I have questions. You actually just, I'm sorry, is it Lee?
Yeah.
Lee, sorry, Kylie. You just actually one of them, enrollment's down right now. And while I don't have the numbers, I'm sure you do or can get, but I think we have to look at, they're down. Obviously, Wildwood's going to continue to be down until we're back in a school, I think. People unfortunately will probably go out of district or, it's just nature of the situation, right? We're still riding the COVID wave where people went to other schools during COVID because they wanted their kids to be in schools and stuff. So, we might be coming out of that in the next year or two. And I'm sorry to say, but the middle school is a big problem, and that drives people out of district. I'm a parent in here. I have 3 children. One went through the whole Wilmington through graduation. The other one went to Shawsheen for high school. And my current 7th grader, we had no intention of sending him to the middle school because I don't know how to say it nicely. It's a mess. It hasn't been there since my oldest son was in that school. There's no leadership there. And I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm just speaking as a parent. There's no leadership there. There's not been any consistent leadership there. And I know in talking to other people, they do not want their children going there. And it's a huge problem. And I think that is a huge concern and a huge reason why the high school enrollment is down. Now, mind you, my son wants to go to the high school in 9th grade, and I have no issue with that. I hope he does. It's going to be his decision. But I'm just saying, having gone through, and my older 2 kids didn't have terrible experience. Like, middle school's hard. I don't care the best of school. Middle school's hard. It's probably the toughest 2-3 years, depending where you are,
of your education, okay? But when you have a school that, and this is solely my opinion, and I know others agree with me, but I'm speaking on just for myself, I do not feel there's strong leadership there. I think the inmates are running the asylum, so to speak, and there needs to be change there. And I think if you make the changes in there, you will see more enrollment go up and people staying in district. So I think we have to look at other things. And the point that Lee brought up about we don't know what the enrollment will be down the line. We also don't want to stuff these schools full and then all of a sudden it comes up. Wilmington is booming, as we all know. The real estate is being eaten up. I understand not everybody has children or school-age children, but we have to consider that. So I personally think we should leave it the way it is. I know we're not taking a vote. I would be more open to this. Maybe, I know it's a timing thing, but I think we need to address things in district before we can even think about this. I appreciate you listening to me.
Thank you. Other questions?
Glenn, can I comment on that? Just to let you know that you are currently in the MSBA's program. So if you choose not to move forward with any of the options that we're putting forward with you tonight, or move forward with any of the options that we are already looking at, you could potentially kick yourselves out of the MSBA program, and you'll lose all of that funding. So it's a matter of an option of whether we stay with the program as the enrollment options as they were, or we make a change to the enrollment options as presented tonight.
I completely I think she moved forward is the way it is. That was the pain that were at the MSBA.
And I can completely appreciate, your point of view as a parent, but I just wanted to make sure that we're all aware of the fact that, we're in the program, and once you leave the program, it's very difficult to get back in.
Thinking about program, you just gave them that clear. I don't know why you're bringing that up.
I just wanted to make sure we were all aware.
I follow what you taught further on what you just said.
Yes, Mary.
Every place here during the presentation and then in the letter, it says may stay in the program if we do another options. Do we have, can we go back and they say, forget it, you're out? If we say we want to study this other option?
Yeah, I'm sorry. And can I follow up on that? Because that was a question I had. Because in the presentation, I don't know either.
Ronnie.
What is it?
Ronnie.
Ronnie? You said the word if. My dad bothered. And then you said we go back to the eligibility phase, which is the beginning. And does that mean now we look for a new OPM, a new architect? Because I would money that. Or I'd be saved forward.
So if I could, I'm going to do my best to navigate questions here and get through them all. Ms. Glesel, your question first. Do we respond? Well,
right. So the key word is may throughout the whole presentation. We may say it.
And then Mr. Turner.
I can take that one. So what we did was, as a group, we started looking at your enrollment options and started having a conversation about what the long-term goals are for the town of Wilmington with Jeff and Glenn and Paul and George. And so as a leadership team, Doran Whittier and SMMA have been having these conversations. So when we brought up additional enrollment options as a possibility, whether we do a district-wide solution, pre-K to 4 or pre-K to 5, we met with the MSBA behind the scenes. We had a call with them, asked them if we were to decide to change the enrollment options, what would be the best way for us to do that? And the MSBA encouraged us to meet with you all, present this to you as an option, and if you all agree to this as an option as individual boards, then we could potentially move forward with this. So what that would mean is that we would move back from the feasibility study in which we are currently beginning and move back into eligibility. To answer your question, no, they told us that we would not have to hire a new OPM and a new designer, that we would just go back to talk about the enrollment options. And so if we do that and we have agreed to it, we will send a letter forward to the MSBA explaining why we'd like to make a change.
We need to do that by the end of June so that at the August board meeting, the MSBA will move us back into eligibility while they review what our new enrollment options are that we've asked for. And in October, they could move us back into feasibility with the new enrollment options. There is a possibility that they could come back and say, we don't agree to those enrollment options, and you can move forward with your original ones.
Mr. Turner.
And that actually, thank you, and partly to follow on to those questions. So that's the worst case scenario is I simply say no, but you're still in the program with what you had originally.
Yes.
Worst case scenario is good to know. So then the other pieces that come out of that, Dr. Brand mentioned that 8th grade may fit from a numbers perspective here, but may not fit from an educational perspective because it may not be the right basis for the right program. Similarly, 5th grade into the middle school, if that were part of the same transition, may not fit there either. May not fit from either programmatic or from culture or from size. And so we could get to some interesting situations where the 8th grade makes sense and the 5th grade doesn't, which would be a very odd situation with your chart of colors up there earlier in terms of space available at different schools. I would be very curious in the review of those from an educational perspective, and certainly Bill Ricca's example is a good one for us. The size of those two pre-Ks that are in the bottom row there seem enormous. I don't personally know of too many pre-K schools that are that big. Is that, I would assume that's part of the review process, like, can you sustain an elementary school of that sort of size?
There's actually a lot of data available about this on the DESE, the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education website. Interestingly, there are actually lots of examples where pre-K and elementary schools, elementary age children are in schools actually much bigger than this. Yeah, in fact, we just toured one in Easton, pre-K 2, it has over 700 kids in it. And part of the logic in that is that districts and communities are realizing that there are several different kinds of economies of scale. And then it's sort of up to the design team to take those kinds of enrollment numbers and make the building feel small.
Yeah.
And there are lots of strategies that can be deployed to do that. Another one that comes to mind is in Acton-Boxborough, where they did a school consolidation with 2 elementary schools. That building is going to be near 1,000 students. We have one in our portfolio down in Northbridge that's almost 1,100 elementary school kids. So, right, that's a local decision, and we want to have lots of conversation about the appropriateness of that, or if that's a direction you're interested, how do we make that experience educationally appropriate for the smallest children? But there are lots of examples of that already exist in the Commonwealth, and we could share a link to that data if that was something folks were interested in.
So, Ms. Prendergast.
I think in our district-wide options, it appears in the memo that we have to move the 8th graders up to the high school and consume that extra capacity. Is there any reason why we can't consider a solution district-wide that doesn't move the 8th grade up to the high school? Or am I misunderstanding?
So the pre-K 5 options assume that 8th grade would stay at the middle school. It's only that pre-K 4 option that looks at moving 8th grade up to the high school, because once that happens, the 5th grade then moves to the middle school and you're left with the pre-K 4 population as the elementary school level. So that's why we've kept both. If we were to take, for example, if we took pre-K 5 out of our options and as a community determine that 8th grade needs to stay at the middle school, well, then you're kind of out of options because we've told MSBA we don't want pre-K 5. So that's why we've kept pre-K 4 and pre-K 5. It allows flexibility with what happens with the 8th grade.
Can I just add to that, Ronnie? There is a wrinkle to your question that maybe is a difference without importance. There are some communities out there that actually have a 1-grade specialty experience. Needham comes to mind. They have a 6th grade center. If the town were to pursue a district-wide pre-K 4, the MSBA is not going to force you to move the 5th grade into the middle school if there are other places where they could go. If, for example, you decided that a 5th grade freestanding school was a good idea. I'm not sure that would make sense here in Wilmington, but there are a handful of those kinds of examples out there also. And just because you picked a pre-K 4, would it necessarily determine the fate of the 5th grade moving up to the middle school?
Thanks. So just a comment is a little short for me. There we go. Thank you. All right. So just a comment. So I'm an elementary school parent right now. I have 2 girls, and I also know a lot of people in elementary schools. The PK through 5 is actually particularly appealing from a logistics perspective. I know some parents that have to do 3 separate CARES pickups. They have to do 3 separate CARES pickups. CARES is the after-school program, or pick up their kids after school going to Wildwood or Boutwell, and then going to, the Woburn Street, and then going to the north. And it's a big challenge. And then all the transitions are very hard on the elementary kids. I mean, I've been living with that the past couple of years. Question I have, though, for this group and maybe for Dr. Brand or Mr. Hull is, if we can only execute on the north side with the MSBA grant, what are the chances of us doing anything with the west side schools? Could we get another MSBA grant? Is that likely? Or is there a plan with the town that could consolidate those schools on the west side of town to match what these options with the north only could be?
I can start, but I know others around this table can add in, because we've talked about this, this is another element that broadens that may broaden the consideration here for our community to think about, and that is what I at least term the time to completion. So, presumably, if we are to go forward with what we have right now with our agreement with MSBA as a community, we would end up with a new school, obviously, on the north side of town. Some school with some great configuration on the north side of town. Following that, that would presumably by default leave us as a community with the need to attend to a sister school or a mirror image school on the west side of town. The decision is a community one in terms of whether or not, as a community, again, there will be the desire or financial need to partner with a mass school building authority. Again, for those that aren't aware, the MSBA is the only grant program in the state to help communities offset costs for school construction. My colleagues here at the table can assist in clarifying this, but a community can only be in an MSBA building program for one project at a time. This project, like any others, is expected to take between 5 to 7 years, 5 to 6 years, after which time then we would apply and, with fingers crossed, hope to get into the MSBA program again. So at best, although I know there's some views around this table that would say it's not going to be 5 to 6 years, it'll be a little bit longer before a community can wrap up, finalize, sign off. I'm not sure what the right terminology is on this project. It's conceivable that if the MSBA was the only funding arm for the town of Wilmington to pursue a next project, we could be talking about 13, 14, 15 years until a project could be completed on the west side of town. That's a long time from my perspective and my opinion in terms of the state of those facilities that have to be maintained with no alterations or changes to the inside of the facility. So it's just something more broadly to consider. But I'll let Mr. Hull speak to the funding piece, which obviously I can't.
Well, certainly, whatever building option is pursued, in my estimation, the town will need to pursue a debt exclusion, a debt exclusion to Proposition 2.5, similar to what was done for the high school, just because the expected cost is going to be such that we are not going to be able to incur the debt costs within the constraints of 2.5. So, in whatever form this project takes, that will need to happen, and I would expect the borrowing, again, similar to the high school, will probably be something in the order of a 25-year borrowing. So having to then pursue a second school on the other side of town, there's clearly, as the superintendent noted, the logistical and legal issue of having to wait until we're finished with the first MSBA project, and then pursue, if the town is so inclined, pursuing potentially a second project with the MSBA, which I would add is very challenging, and I don't have the numbers offhand, but I seem to recall something in the order of 70 some odd communities applied the year we got in, and there was something in the order of 7 or 10 communities that were allowed in.
13, I think.
13. So it's a minority of communities, a small minority of communities that get in. So the town could certainly, for that second school, opt to go it alone, so to speak. Clearly the challenge will be taking on the full cost of a school, 10 years from now or 5 years from now, whatever, in addition to the borrowing costs we're incurring for this school. So I think from a financial standpoint, and we have not looked at this in great detail, the prospect of doing a second school within 5 or 10 years of the first, but I would imagine again there would need to be a debt exclusion for that second school, and the question then becomes people's ability to pay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And then just a quick follow up from that. If, let's say, we go with the option where you consolidate many of the schools, maybe even one, or even the one where it's just the north side of town, could the town help to fund some of the costs by selling some of the land that the retired buildings will be on? Because the land, that does seem like a lot of acreage of land. Is that something that's been talked about at all, or is that something that could even be feasible?
In terms of sale of surplus property, certainly that can be done. I think we would want to take a look in a more global sense as to what the needs of the community are, whether there are, just for sake of example, recreational needs that might, make it advisable to hold some of that property aside. Ultimately, as I recall, because any property that has a school on it is under the jurisdiction of the school department, the school committee would have to take a vote to release the property before the town could actually put it up as surplus.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is there, Mr. Holman?
Now walking all the way over there.
Fair enough.
And you'll get me. First question I have: any of these projects and these phases that you're looking at, any of them are you considering additions to schools that we will be keeping? Our concern with the way we're trying to stuff children into different schools, that it might be fine today, but we're going to have problems in the future, and it's going to cost us even more to correct those problems. So I'm curious if there is any consideration about additions to schools and what schools they would be, and if our town departments have said that these schools are strong enough that they will last another 25 or so years.
Sure, I can answer that. As part of the study phase that we're going to go through, we're going to analyze all of the existing buildings to understand what we're starting off with. And any potential solution where we're applying it to one of those buildings, whether it's through renovating what you have and adding new space onto that, as part of an MSBA project, they're looking to have their part of the funding go towards 50-year plus projects. We're looking to make long-term solutions for the community and both for MSBA's investment. So we're going to be looking at extending the lives of your existing buildings if they're going to be under consideration and move forward, and also looking at the educational appropriateness of them.
Mr. Mendel, and then Mr. West.
Thank you, Dr. Brand. Thank you for this presentation. Obviously very informative, a lot to digest. Certainly can sound actually surprised that a vote might be expected. But I have a question, maybe best suited for the town manager, but given the fact that we are presented with these options here tonight, and before I can even give my position on it, I wonder if procedurally, if this would be appropriate, despite the fact that the March 8th, 2022 article, is this within the scope of the article that was overwhelmingly passed by the residents? I wonder if this change in direction would be within the scope of the article, if we would need to go back to another special town meeting.
I guess that's my first question.
The article, and I don't have it in front of me, but I want to go back and look at it specifically, but I believe that the article was to authorize funding for the feasibility study to continue. I don't believe that, at least initially, that this would be a problem on the premise that we would be temporarily taking a step back into eligibility, and then if MSBA, once they make their decision, either authorizing these additional options or not authorizing them, then we would go back into feasibility study. So I don't foresee a problem there.
Thank you. And last, just my next only other comment that I have this time would be that, thank you for calling this urgent meeting 3 weeks ago. I'm a little surprised that we're getting the information on the same day that we're expected to vote, but so that was the same that was done by Dorn Whittier back in the winter when we were considering the options.
Well, I guess just note that if there's not an expectation necessarily that a vote be taken tonight, I think the thought is that if it appears based upon the questions and the conversation that there's a sense amongst the committees that there's a comfort level in going in one direction or the other, then a vote could be taken. If it turns out that there's a lot of uncertainty amongst committee members or questions unanswered, then we had internally talked about the prospect of another meeting to bring the group back and revisit this on June 21st, I believe was the date, correct? So we're obligated, if we want to pursue these changes and get on the docket for MSBA's Board of Directors meeting in October, we need to make this request by or before June 27th. So certainly there's no obligation for the group to take a vote tonight. If the circumstances are such that folks are comfortable, then that's fine. If not, then we would look to revisit it on the 21st, unless there's a sense amongst the group that this is kind of dead on arrival, so to speak.
To correct it, but I believe it is number 4 on the agenda, calls for a potential vote. But, I'll leave it at that. I am disappointed that we have had, since we were notified of this meeting, we got a select meeting. It wasn't on the agenda there. It was a school committee meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't on the agenda there. All of a sudden, on the eve of this deadline, we're meeting tonight, and it almost feels like we have to vote. Otherwise, we may mess up. But
well, and I'll just add in terms of the distribution, if I may, of information, we recognize that the meeting calendars for all of these boards never are synchronized. And collectively as a group, we thought that it would be both appropriate and respectful and fair to coordinate the distribution of this at the same time. I respect the differing views on that, but as certainly we've come to learn, it's difficult to coordinate the dissemination of information at the same time for all. We did talk about different meetings and different presentations, but we recognized that this would mean 4 different meetings, and we felt like with the time frame that we were under, that was not feasible either. But I respect your certainly your position. Was there another question?
Yeah, I appreciate it, and I like to take the views of all the different departments and committees. But your presentation should have been sent to us all ahead of time, so that we could review it as you're presenting it. Instead, a lot of this is new. And as I look around now, I'm sitting here saying, how can we vote on anything that you've presented tonight where we don't have enough information? We don't have enough time to digest it. And I'd be concerned. The information should be brought out prior, and extended during the time prior, so that we could review it, discuss it, and then come to the meeting with more knowledge. I unfortunately, it didn't happen. And now we're hearing things that you're looking at, possibly asking us to vote on. And I will say right now, if you ask us to vote, I would recommend to my board that we do not take the vote because we don't have enough information yet. Thank you.
Just a point, or I'm sorry, slightly to anybody want to speak, but Mr. Brand, to your point, you want to get everything together because it made sense, things easier, and I understand that, but you be in a presentation like this to various committees separate, because you came to the Board of Selectmen on the Zoom meetings, went to the Finance meeting another day. You did that on separate occasions. But they're not doing it now because it's easy.
No,
I could have gone to a selectmen's meeting or a school committee meeting.
Point of order. We're here to discuss the options.
He brought it up.
I'm trying to get it back on track, and as I think it's only fair to the rest of us, quite know this could be taken offline, and this discussion can't pursue. But frankly, this is the discussion of our schools and whether or not to move forward, which I think would be in the best interest of the town as a whole, because of less public buildings they have to maintain. As I see it, we're not voting as to, and this is where I have to interrupt, my apologies. But I'd like to get back to this discussion. If there's clarity and you're not ready to move forward with an opinion, so do it. Please do so without any question,
Are you directing that to me?
No, I was talking about the body from this purview.
I have an opinion, and this was a non-starter way back during the feasibility study of having one school with 1,500 kids in it. It was a non-starter amongst everyone. So that's my point.
I have to agree with you. I'm not a big fan of what they're focusing on with the grades per, but I'm hoping that a feasibility study would share light and as to what the grade breakup within our district could look like for schools. Because I'm not considering what those three options were. I have to agree, and my sincerest apologies to you for him. But
Mr. Witt.
Yes, we one month on the board, because with this topic. Again, we hit. Anyhow, like one question I have is in respect to the MSBA, what is the percentage if they take generally back?
Portland University.
The reimbursement rate.
Reimbursement rate varies depending upon the community, depending upon the size of the school, and depending upon the enrollment.
So, generally speaking, would you say that's 30 to 40% on average? Probably no higher than 40% on average.
On average, somewhere between 30 and 40.
Because the issue that we have too is that we're in the process right now of joining the town hall school administration of them. We're taking that out of high, but we're still borrowing money to do that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
We're building a new senior center, and that's being paid for out of the pre-tax overlay, correct?
No.
So that's not borrowed against that.
Yes.
We're in the process of potentially buying the Sharapa farm for, whatever the figure is, 3, 4, 5 million, whatever it ends up being, all right? And probably developing a fire substation in and around that area. And that's been a kind of a promise to this town for the last 20 years. It's just, I'm just seeing a lot of money. And now you want to go back to the residents over and above the Wildwood and say, hey guys, I know we told you it was only the Wildwood, but now we have a balloon. The other thing also is that when you consolidate buildings, what happens 30 years from now when, like a Wildwood? What would happen if we only had 3 schools and one of them failed for some reason? What do you do with the kids? Right now you can kind of play a little high-five, putting some in one school, some in another, and praying that it works. The other thing on the high school, 10 years ago, we was open, the building was at capacity. Suddenly it's not. Suddenly we could put a whole other grade in the school, at least, temporarily, if not permanently. And I'm not seeing, I don't know if I'm seeing his foresight there. And I think also is that, in consolidating the schools, they're also looking at adding a wealth of traffic, buses, if it's possible to get the buses, to be able to fulfill contracts to whatever schools that we're consolidating to. So at least a few comments on my end, and for me, I'm a numbers guy, so I kind of like to see numbers. So it's kind of tough to say, yeah, let's go ahead and build some schools. Who doesn't want to build schools and help our kids? I mean, that's on face value. But then when you say, well, it might be $150 to $200 million, I'm guessing. I don't know. And we should see something. And unfortunately, even the finance committee, as a committee, can't. Sounds like you have a membership here that you guys can talk, but as a committee, there's you can't come up with a committee consensus tonight.
But we're not talking about price tonight. We're just talking about options.
But it ends up being price. I mean, it's kind of like
We're not at that step yet.
No, I understand that, but I think if I'm going car shopping, there's an expectation that in a week or two in a month, I'm going to buy a car, and now I need to finance or pay for that car. So that's. Dr. Blason.
Hey everyone. Yeah, this is just for the TV, right?
That's right.
Okay. So I just want to sort of recenter us a little bit on what it is we're doing right now. We don't have all the details. We don't have the price. We don't have whether or not this is going to be educationally sound for our kids. We don't really know any of that. What we're asked to do is just not to vote necessarily, but to think through what could this look like if. And so when I first saw the memo, I thought, oh gosh, are you kidding? It's like, what is going on? And now looking at this presentation, I'm like, oh, I see the dilemma. I see how this opens up a whole other opportunity. I don't want to think of it as not being an opportunity. And then I go to the other side that's like, would a building like that ever be approved? I don't know, but I'm not sure I can sit here and say it's not something worth looking at when you tell me it's going to take us another 15 to 20 years to even address anything on the west side of town. Is certainly concerning, and I'm starting to predict that we're going to have more Wildwood type issues on the west side of town if we don't think. So sure, a building that could fit both sides district-wide would be sort of a dream. As far as the size of it, I don't remember there being an overwhelming sort of negative feeling toward that. I myself taught in a school, it was 2,000 kids, it was 4 elementary schools, it was one building, but 4 elementary schools. Mm-hmm. And I imagine if you're talking about something this large, it could mimic something like that, right? A separate pre-K, 2 separate elementary schools, but they have shared spaces. They share the cafeteria, they share the auditorium, they have shared spaces. So I think in some ways it probably makes good sense monetarily long-term if we could even get something like that approved. But just to sort of refocus us, what we're looking at tonight is whether or not this should even be studied. That's what we're being asked to do because we don't have all the information in front of us. And then just one last point from all of you, is this what you're thinking we should do? I mean, I'm kind of looking to the experts here. Is this your recommendation to us that it sounds like that's what you would recommend, but are you saying this is in the best interest of Wilmington to look a little bit deeper at this now that we know about the excess space at the high school and the middle school?
Well, I'll just speak for myself. If it's a recommendation to study this, and I think it comes back to that, and thank you for the effort to refocus, I think nothing ventured, nothing gained, it's an analysis, it's a study, it's not a commitment, it's not a sign-on, nor is it a decision around what the final project will look like. If we do not study this, I do firmly believe we can't return to it as a community, at least relative to the 8th grade transitioning here to the high school. And this is a domino piece, right, in all of this broader reconsideration. Again, it's the collective will, the sense, so to speak, of a community, and I know we're not polling the community, and we're not intentionally going back to poll the community, but if it's a sense of, no, this doesn't make sense for whatever reason, then, as has been mentioned before, so be it, and we can move forward. But a recommendation to broaden the consideration and explore what might be possible to try and reduce our time to completion and improve the teaching and learning conditions of 6 elementary schools across the district, I think it's something worth considering as a community.
And then just to follow up, Dr. Brand, the only negative or detriment to that is the timing. That we moved back a tiny bit. Months? 6 months?
6 months.
Months.
Potentially 6 months.
Potentially 6 months. So we're looking at sort of the pros and the cons. That's really the only con I'm hearing, is that it pushes us back. Is that accurate, or am I misunderstanding?
Yes.
No, that's right.
That's correct.
From your perspective, that's the only negative side of considering this. Okay, thank you.
Dr. J.
Hi, excuse me. My name is Brad Jackson. Excuse me. And I'm the reason why the Finance Committee doesn't have a quorum tonight, because I was reappointed last night and I didn't get a chance to get sworn in today, so my apologies to everybody. But I work, so what can I say? I was a superintendent of schools for 18 years, and I actually worked in Wilmington as the director of administration and finance in the Roman House when we decided to build the middle school. And I wish I could go back 25 years and have the conversation we're having now and have the study that these people are proposing. It is worth the wait for 1 year to make a comprehensive look, in my personal opinion, at all of the options, so that we have to look out 20 years. We have to look out 30 years. And we have schools that were all built in the 1960s, essentially, left to address, and they are coming down the pike whether we like it or not. To study this, to me, is a no-brainer. It has little risk other than to delay the occupancy from 2028 to 2029. And yes, it could yield a much more expensive, in the short run, solution that may or may not be politically viable in this community, but that's the information, in my opinion, everybody in this room needs in order to make an intelligent, well-informed decision. So I applaud you for doing this. I applaud you for having the courage to put the brakes on and say, wait a minute, there are other options here that may be better. I can tell you, some of the options you presented as an educator, I think are horrible, and some of those options I think are awesome. But we're not here to talk about options tonight. We're here to talk about the very simple question, do we authorize these folks to go back to the MSBA with other options at the risk or cost of a 1 year delay in the process? And I encourage boards to consider that choice in that light, not whether you like oh my God, a 1,500 student elementary school is too big. Well, I was superintendent of schools in Holliston for 16 years, and we had a 1,500 student elementary school. Placentino Elementary School, 750 kids, next to the Miller Elementary School was 750 kids, and they shared a common gym and all that stuff. And it was perfect. And it was a hell of a lot cheaper than having 6 elementary schools. But that doesn't mean it's the best solution here for Wilmington now. The experts and the school building committee and the school committee and the other committees need to study it. So to not move forward with this recommendation, to me, because you may or may not like one of the options, is ultimately as short-sighted as the decision to start in the middle and build a middle school as our first foray into reconstruction was 25 years ago.
That's riveting. Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
Thank you. I'll just kind of echo my voice, and I actually echo the sentiments that were stated earlier. The only difference, as I'm reading it, between the original agreement and the revised one is an elimination of one option. And one option being the pre-K through grade 3 on the north side, which it still perpetuates the need for multiple transitions during the elementary school phase. So eliminating that and still keeping those two options, looking at it,
and adding to it the option of a district-wide grade 4 or grade 5, I think makes the most sense. First, the town does have a multitude of elementary schools, and yes, the phasing of them and the transitions does become sometimes cumbersome. But more than that, I think you will have the same scenario whether you are going after a north side elementary school that is only geared towards the north side of the property, or you're going for a district-wide. They both provide you have to have a comprehensive community engagement plan, and one that will engage the community from the very beginning and take you for the ride, because otherwise what you are going to have is an inequity in town, where now you will have the north side having a new school where you will not be able to provide one for the west side for at least a good 15 years. If the option is, after the study, to find that maybe a district-wide K through, preschool to 5 is the appropriate decision to make, I think it is one that by community engagement, you could get the whole town behind it. I see it as just as equally of, an opportunity to get the town behind as it will a challenge, as it will be to just address the north side of the town. And with that, I definitely support the motion to maybe take a step back, be a slight inconvenience of time of 6 months to potentially 8 months, but have the right study done for the community and the town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Turner.
Thank you. I do want to clarify one point earlier. My questions about 1,500 doesn't mean I don't think we should study this. I think the approach that's being taken is exactly what we need for almost all the exact same reasons as Dr. Jackson said. Having this opportunity doesn't mean we're making any of the decisions today. We're simply changing the scope. Dropping pre-K to 3 is probably in everyone's interest. It will save some time and money to not study that option because it's probably not one we would have taken. Adding these other options, I think, is exactly what we should be doing, and I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll follow up, Mr. Durant, too. Yes. You mentioned, and you were answering Chairman Palmer's question about renovations. You said that renovations was on the table. Was that for all of the schools? Renovations for all of the schools?
It's a requirement by MSBA as part of the study that we look at renovations and additions to each of the schools under consideration.
Because I like the neighborhood concept of schools, to be honest with you. So has it been considered to look at the Shawshing and the Luna Street, the west and the north, as a K-5 project with the Balboa Baylor Creek in, or a pre-K-5 or a pre-K-4, all of the schools, so that they're updating and renovating, then you're making it a neighborhood-type schools, and you're taking care of all 4 schools. You're decommissioning the Wildwoods, and you're looking at a different concept there. I don't see that. Why can't we go pre-K to 5 in those 4 major schools? If our enrollment is down, to the credit of finance, they've been crying enrollment is going down during the budget process for years. So it should have been a shock to anybody that the enrollment is down. So is that going to be an option to look at the neighborhood schools pre-K to 5?
Is your question specifically to look at your existing schools and change the configurations to pre-K to 5 to have multiple pre-K to 5s?
The schools that I mentioned, the Shawshing, Woodland Street, this west, and the north.
The only things we are allowed currently to study, right, is replacing Wildwood pre-K to K, right? That's what MSBA has agreed with if we stay the course right now. We are allowed to look at pre-K to 3, consolidating 2 of the schools into 1 as pre-K to 3. And we also have the option of looking at pre-K to 5 to consolidate 3 of those schools into 1, just on the north side of town.
Okay, so then just a second ago, you said you were in to look at renovations of all of the schools. Now you're saying no. I'm very confused.
We're able to look whatever options are approved by MSBA for the schools that we're able to study. we are required to look at additions and renovations for each of those schools. So if you open the net up to a larger group and MSBA agrees with it, we're going to look at those options for additions and renovations.
Yeah, that is the mix. If you're going for the option where you want to look at every opportunity you can we look at that opportunity where we take those 4 major elementary schools to look at that one? Can we add that to the
As long as it's done one building at a time with MSBA, you can only have one building project on one site that will be funded by them at a single point. So doing 2 PK to 5s in your existing buildings, they would pick one.
So then I go back to the original meeting when you said you're looking to renovate all the school. That kind of thing really right.
It is correct.
Okay. Well, you got to confused.
I will also just point out that the facilities master plan, the town's facilities master plan in 2018 was quite clear, and I know there's members of the committee who were a part of that, was quite clear in outlining the then costs projecting out to maintain the operation of all the facilities. And that was a fairly extensive list. Again, those were in, I think, 2018 or 2017 dollars. So just thinking back, Mr. Wester, your question earlier around, the totality of these costs as outlined in that facilities master plan, if to do no MSBA project at all, and to continue to operate 8 schools, that report, fairly extensive and fairly well done, I thought, was fairly telling in terms of the overall financial costs to the community to maintain the operation of 8 schools. Should we not be here tonight? Should we not have ever applied to the MSBA? My opinion, it's pretty daunting. Members of the committee can speak to that, but I just wanted to put that out there. Mr. Ragsdale, next question.
I think it's very good that we're having this conversation. I think that we wouldn't want to be in a position where anyone asked, well, did you consider using that extra space that you had at the high school and the middle school? And then we said we never really considered it. Like, it was just sort of out there, but we never even had never mind an MSBA study. We never even talked about it as a town or as boards. So I think it's very good that we're having this conversation. I tend to think about what we want the future of education in Wilmington to look like. And in that regard, I generally don't like the idea of moving the 8th grade up to the high school and the 5th grade to the middle school. There are so many downstream consequences that flow from that. As Dr. Brand already mentioned, the 8th grade has a completely different educational program. It has a completely different structure. You can put it potentially in the building, although that's something we're not even quite sure about. But you could put it in the building, but that doesn't mean that actually the educational program fits there or can mesh properly with the high school and with the facilities that are there. And that, of course, breaks it from the rest of its community. It would have to suddenly be essentially a part of the high school for a lot of things. We'd have 5 grades mixing together in certain ways because you need physical proximity for a lot of things. And then if we move the 5th grade up, that's a different type of middle school. A 5 to 7 middle school is not the same as a 6 to 8 middle school, and you have the same issue because the 5th graders have an elementary program. The educational experience that they receive in 5th grade is completely different from what we provide at the middle school. And so you're either looking at having, again, 2 completely different programs that you have to suddenly incorporate in one building, or change the program and decide that 5th graders are ready for a middle school educational program. And there are a lot of things that people may not like about that, as well as kind of consolidating everyone from their sort of neighborhood schools into one building at the 5th grade. So I think there are a lot of potential educational consequences that we sort of think about how that would roll down. But to me, the primary benefit of this idea is that it presents us ultimately with more options. It gives us more flexibility. And I do kind of hate the idea that it would be a delay in the process, because I am very impatient to get our kids into better facilities. And I want the school yesterday. But we really do have to look at the long term here. For the length of time that we expect kids to be ultimately in this new building, a 6-month and 8-month delay is not very much, even just in the span of construction. And I think the most important flexibility it gives us is the ability to focus not necessarily only on the north side of town, which right now we're limited to. So whether we do a pre-K to 4, 1,500 school, or possibly a pre-K to 3, that would be more like 1,000 students. But we don't even have the option to look at those possibilities right now, and something that allows us to address both sides of town in some regard. And again, doesn't take anything off the table that we already have. The options we have now are not going anywhere, but this gives us additional options and more flexibility, and that seems like a wise thing to have.
Can I?
Sorry, clarification, because I think this will help a little bit. When you talked about renovating, say, the North or Woburn Street, it will be renovating it to become the one, will renovate it and add on the one North Side School. So the question of what does renovation need? It's not replacing in kind, correct, and making a better new building for the existing new light. It would be somehow a larger school. That site was most of the core of the building intact as a renovation addition brought in. It couldn't be just renovate.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I just clarify something for Mr. Ragsdale? The intent of tonight's meeting was to actually change the enrollment options. Currently, they are pre-KK, pre-K3, pre-K5 on the north side of town. What we're asking is to change that to be pre-KK, pre-K4, pre-K5, north side of town, pre-K4, and pre-K5 district-wide. So the pre-K3 option would be eliminated.
Right, unless we specifically asked for that.
Yes.
Right, under what you're proposing right now, that.
Yes.
We have to specifically ask for anything that we wanted the flexibility to.
Yes. So just to be clear, in exploring these options, so right now we have 3 options. And of those 3 options, any school in which we're looking to participate in, which would be the Wildwood School, the Woburn Street School, and the North, those 3 schools will all be reviewed by Doran Whittier, in addition to any additional space within the town that we think we could potentially use to build a new school if we go with that option. And then each one of those has sub-options. So it's to renovate the Wildwood as is and give it back to the community for pre-KK. A pre-K to 3 option, you have whether or not you can renovate an existing building, put an addition renovation on, or a new school. So they all have sub-options within them. What we're saying is we're now looking at 5 options. So the 5 options, pre-K, pre-K4, pre-K5, pre-K4, and pre-K5 district-wide, and all of those have 3 options within them. So it's a lot of options that we're looking to do. Throwing in a pre-K3 in that makes it even larger. So I just wanted to make sure that we were all clear in what we're looking
to do. So to that point, and to Mr. Kyra's point, if we did in district-wide, that would give us the sub-option to the other side of town for renovations.
Renovations with additions, because whatever
she would get an addition that could accommodate a K through
4, K through 5, whatever.
But that opens up that side of town for the renovation of those schools and out.
Well,
one school.
Right.
You told us earlier that the west side was not included in this. This is just a north side. Now you're saying that it would include the west side.
So what we're saying,
Or in the district-wide, would
Right.
the west side be included? Otherwise, right, it stands on the north side.
Right, but what I'm saying is they said before that the west side, if it was a district-wide, it's one building. Correct?
Yeah.
Where's that one building and what, you know what I mean? That's what I'm saying.
we don't know yet. That's what we need to.
We need Harris point earlier. You said that those, forget it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It's an important point to make, and I guess let me take a stab at this, and maybe I'm off the mark, but I think the question that Board Member Kyra was asking was, is there an ability through one variation to allow for renovation or addressing the schools on the west side of town? And as I understand it, if there is one pre-K to 5, for example, that would include students across the community, the options in terms of reviewing renovation would be looking, for example, could the Shawsheen School be renovated to accommodate pre-K to 5? That could be...
And be the district.
and be the district school? Or could the West Intermediate be renovated to be the pre-K to 5 district school? But ultimately, there's only one school that's going to get that attention. Is that accurate?
If we go back to the MSBA,
Right.
Correct.
if we do not go back to the MSBA and say the status quo, then everything or anything for new school construction or renovation has to be on the north side of town only.
Right.
Correct.
Mr. Palmer, you had a question?
I'm hopeful. I believe pre-K to 5, 6, 8, 9, 12 is what the schools should, how the school should be created. Concern that I have is, and I know we're only talking about the north side of now. If this comes through and we do use a formula, something like K5, 6, 8, 9, 12, will that be implemented on the west side school hour also? Or are you going to say, well, this side of town, the west side of town is the north side of town is going to have this new formula, but we're going to leave the north, the west alone. If you are framing that, I'm going to warn you right now that it will be actively laborious. People are going to be real upset about that. But if it's something that has to be rectified in the existing buildings, it's a G-Walk company.
Let me take a shot at that. I think, what hangs clearly in the balance here in large part is how we, to the point earlier, how we emerge and move forward as a school system. And what I would imagine, as has been done in the past for many, many years, as I've come to learn, what is done to one side of town will need to be done to the other, so to speak. That being said, and look, for lots of different reasons, I'll just speak personally in my role as superintendent, learning about the desire or the recommendation, let me restate that, the recommendation out of the facilities master plan to pursue school consolidation was an amazing thing to come to learn for lots of different reasons. I could talk at length about that. You don't want to hear that, but operationally, financially, educationally, there's all kinds of gains to be made with that. If whatever comes out of this project, whatever project it will be, hopefully does include as much consolidation as possible. To the extent that that can be replicated on the other side of town, will be hindered by time, though. And so if your question is, well, will we create smaller, mini K to 5 or pre-K to 5 schools on the west side of town until another? I can't imagine that would happen, but that would be something that would have to be explored. I think, again, if we just constrain this and don't go back to the MSBA and constrain this study and the work on the one side of town, the other side of town, unfortunately, is going to have to wait, especially if MSBA is the only way to get to a new project.
And the only other question I have is, I don't know if I heard you right or not. Are you claiming that the state's going to pick up 40%?
Don't know. Yeah, we are not sure. We don't know that yet until we start getting into the actual design and determining the square footage of the building. And that's based on the enrollment.
Okay. The only reason I asked that is I was at a get-together up in Harvard. I went with a school committee member on their new school that they had just built. And I think you all good. You people were involved in? We were in Harvard?
We were not.
Oh, okay. No short thing. Anyways, there was a number of cities and towns there talking about a fine, and they were all telling me that what they were hearing for numbers were 20%. And that concerned me with what we have going on here. If this number is going to drop down to 20%, that's a certain fault.
20% of your project cost is better than 0%.
So the MSBA.
80 years. Not for 80 years, it's not. You got to start looking, you have to look at realization too, that if you got a school that's falling apart, and you got to wait 8 years to get it approved, and then the construction of it and everything, the 20%, yes, it is a lot of money. But if you cost that out over, an extended period of time, you can find that it might be wiser for you because of increases in everything that, whether it's materials, labor, property, whatever you have to do. It might not be the golden apple that you're looking for. And I'm not discouraging us not to. But I am tired of hearing people say that, that they're throwing out numbers of 40%, this, that, and the other thing, and we don't really know yet. And we know we know this is a very expensive ordeal, and I'll take every penny I can get. So don't get me wrong, but let's be very realistic about it, and hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
This brings
sorry.
Apologies, but I hear your comment and I appreciate it. Understanding though that the MSBA has a clear calculator and a defined way to, as a mechanism to figure out exactly what our percentage point would be. The middle school and the high school that was recently, in recent years, constructed would give us a clear indication of where percentage-wise we fall into, because ultimately it comes within the same range of most typically the most affluent neighborhoods are the ones that receive 20, 25 to 30%, and the ones that are not as affluent, and I'm talking about the Lexingtons, the Concords of the state, not the Wilmingtons, we would project to be closer to the 35, 38 percentile factor. However, by the end of the feasibility, before it ever goes to town vote, you will already know exactly the percentage that you will be considered for MSBA, as well as what the dollar value is that the MSBA will be providing towards the grant program. So in allowing them to carry on with the study, you lose nothing.
No, I would lock them all up in this room until the thing is out. Make sure we don't get out of this place.
I would venture to believe that your percentage point would not be below 20%. I guarantee, I can't guarantee it, but I would pretty much figure it to be closer into the 30s.
So just for perspective, I'm doing a project in Stoneham. I'm doing the Stoneham High School project, and their percentage is at 38%.
Winchester is currently at a 35%.
So, Mr. Kite.
Mr. Ragsdale, I agree with you. I'm not a big fan of you with the 8th grade up into a high school. Not a big fan of going the 5th grade into the middle school. But as I'm looking at the options, if we stay the course, the first 3 options talk about the north side. Now we're talking about the north side and west side, right? What you got to do to the north, you got to do to the west. And I don't really understand that concept. Considering our schools are in great shape, thanks to Mr. Hooper and the buildings department. Kudos to you for what you do. And then I look at the new options, and the first 1, 2, and 3 options talk about the north side. Doesn't talk about the west side, just so you're looking at the same thing I am. I think the only time the west side comes into play is if we go with this one big, huge district school. It's do away with the neighborhood school concept. So just so we're aware that we're just talking about the north side.
Because you'd only get one school at a time.
Yeah, I get it.
Just to clarify, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's because this is enrolled in MSBA, the Wildwood School project. So any reconfiguration or any project at all must include the Wildwood School within the scope of this construction or renovation or anything else. So there is, in this manner, there's no possibility to go back without starting from scratch, throwing this one out, and to just focus on the west side. It's either north side or district-wide.
Correct.
So today we're contemplating
the idea of sticking with north side only or broadening the scope to include district-wide. Correct. North only for district-wide. Those are our two choices. Great.
And just to follow up on that, when you talked about it just concentrates on the Wildwood, I thought I heard earlier that it can concentrate on the moving street up to north, then moving in expanding that to include the Wildwood.
As long
So
as the
we're
Wildwood
decommissioning the Wildwood.
school itself,
Right.
our mobile selves are included.
That's the plan.
We're everything up, yeah.
Right, so the Wildwood could be decommissioned, then it could be moved as do with the north and the movement or reconfigured to those two schools as well.
As long as
But everything here is on the north side.
I have to
tell them.
I just have to say, I think we need to stop saying that, west side, you one side, but west side gets nothing, because that really is pitting one side of town against each other, and that's not fair. This was designed for the Wildwood. I'm not even just, but where we are today was because of the situation with the Wildwood, and then the oil spill happened and everything. That's what this is about. I think it's very unfair. It's sending a very bad message to the residents of this town that we don't care about one side as much as the other side. So I personally would appreciate that we just talk about this as the Wildwood project and the schools as a whole, but say this only happens on the north side, the west side doesn't get it. That's unfair to this town to do that.
I agree.
If I could just help clarify, Mr. Kyra, when MSBA only gives you one project to build, right? In the same way, they only accept one school building into the program. But with that one school building, they were allowing different grade configurations. So since Wildwood is part of Wildwood, Woburn Street North, those became 3 different grade configurations originally that could be studied. And out of that comes a project. So I'm not saying north and west, but that's what MSBA.
Right now, if residents are listening to this or will watch it, we're all going to hear about it because you're pitting, the collective you are pitting one side of town against the other. It makes it look like everybody in this room who, goes one way or the other doesn't care about one or the other. And that is not the case. This is getting taken off the rails. This is the Wildwood MSBA project. We're here to decide we can feasibility to expand it or whatever, but we need to stop using that phrase and saying the west side gets nothing. This only happens on the north side. Let's focus on the schools. And you may not think that matters, but it does, because you know what? This is the first time in the 3 years this happened that phrase has been spoken, that the west side is getting anything. So you're doing a detriment into this community by doing that, and there's going to be fallout from it. I'm just letting you know.
It's just
prefer to hear that idea.
Yeah, and but what came out of the MSBA are these 3 projects that we're doing.
I'm not arguing that at all. What I'm saying is, in this room, it has been repeated multiple times, only the north side, the west side. So you're pitting it's an issue. Anybody in this room will tell you that it's an issue. It was already brought up. What we have to do on the north is the west and north, whatever. It's people's perception. And I'm just saying, this was never about the north side or the west side of town. This is about the Wildwood. And it should still be about the Wildwood. And if it includes a district, whatever happens, great. I'm all for it. This is about Wilmington. So we need to stop using the phrase west side and north side and worry about the schools. The one community.
Yeah, which quite frankly is why we all discussed this idea.
I think you're trying to pit people against each other, frankly, with all due respect.
I'm sorry. I'm not quite sure why you're saying this to me, but anyway, so this is why we have the discussion, and we brought this to the group to expand the study because we saw more potential opportunities. So we appreciate your position, absolutely.
Everybody stop saying that. That's all I've asked. I said my piece.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from members of our committees here tonight? Well, as mentioned I think mentioned at the outset, again, in terms of what the next steps are, we as a community, again, can opt to do nothing and stay the course with what was submitted relative to the respective decisions through a vote of the select board and the school committee back a number of years ago. Similarly, if we are to revisit the MSBA with, as has been discussed tonight, this request to broaden or expand, however you want to define this next step, again, it warrants the signatures on a document, on a memo of those same individuals, superintendent, town manager, and the school committee chair. We originally, as you know, we originally scheduled two meetings for these discussions, knowing that there is an awful lot of information to take in and to consider, and knowing again that not to over dramatize this place, but we are at rather an important juncture, I think, for the community of Wilmington relative to schools and school construction. So I'm not sure we're speaking here in the moment, Mr. Hall, but I'm curious your thoughts in terms of next steps, and specifically the decision to come back on June 21st, or your thoughts on how to proceed.
Well, I believe that it would be advisable to schedule a meeting for the 21st, in part recognizing that the Finance Committee does not have a quorum here. And I think one of the purposes of having the groups here collectively was first of all to make sure everybody got the same message at the same time and there weren't any concerns in that respect. And then secondly, to get the opinions, as has certainly been expressed this evening, but ultimately to get a vote from each of the respective committees as to whether there's a desire to pursue these additional options or not, recognizing that at the end of the day, from MSBA's standpoint, they're looking for a vote of the school committee in the sign-off of the school superintendent and myself. As a practical matter, if we're not unified, at least recognizing that we may not get unanimous vote across all boards, if there isn't a majority vote of the respective boards to make this change, then I think it's ill-advised to pursue a change. So I understand certainly some members of the board expressed concern about the information and how it was presented, or the timing that as to when it was presented. It would seem to me providing some additional time for folks to consider this, and again, giving perhaps members of the Finance Committee the opportunity to have a quorum at the next meeting would make sense.
George, Dr. Reed, would it be possible to have the PowerPoint presentation sent out to everyone here?
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah, yes, certainly we will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking that. We will distribute that to everybody, including those that are not here. And we will continue, as we have tried through my office to do so as well, to make all of the respective materials related most recently to the Wildwood Building Committee available to the community. If we're working hard to make sure that this is accessible. We know that there's lots of people that have interest in this, even if they don't regularly tune into any of our meetings. And so we will continue to do so, including the information for tonight and that presentation. So unless there is anything else or any further questions, I guess I will move. I'm sorry.
Because I'm not that familiar with how town meetings operate, if everybody here was in agreement that we move forward with the additional options, does that supersede not having the quorum that you need? So could you move forward on that? Because we haven't asked if we have no overwhelming support for it or not. So if you were to ask, is that possible to move forward on that and not have to have a meeting on June 21st?
So from a technical standpoint, that could happen. You know, I think, as I said earlier, MSBA and certainly Lee or other folks on the design team here jump in, but my understanding is, from a legal standpoint, MSBA requires the endorsement of any change by the school committee and requires the signature of the chair of the school committee, the signature of the school superintendent, and the signature of the town manager. I think as a practical matter, we want to try to get a sense of the various committees that are here this evening as to where they stand. And this is just my personal perspective. It's not required, but I think it's highly advisable to get a vote of these boards. And if each of the boards ultimately endorses the idea to pursue these additional options, then I think that would seem to suggest, recognizing it may not be fully unanimous amongst all the members of the boards, but if they collectively, in the majority, are in favor of this, then it would seem to me a good indicator to move forward. If, on the other hand, of the 4 boards that are here this evening, you know, 1 or 2 simply are not in favor of making a change, then the challenge that we have is going forward with the divided house, so to speak. So it's, in my estimation, ill-advised to try to pursue something like that when all along the way we need to have the town government, the major boards, in unison, in my estimation, if this is going to fly in the long run.
Thanks, Mr. Hall. Any other question before we move to public comments?
I just have more question here. On this memo that was sent out, it does say that we have informally reached out to MSBA. So has there been communication with them that they would consider this change?
Yes, we informally met with them.
You met informally with them?
Mm-hmm. Yep, we were on a remote call with them, discussed the changes that we were looking, and asked them for guidance on how we could move forward with that. And that guidance led us to where we are tonight.
But to clarify, right, correct me if I'm wrong, it was, could we even return to the MSBA and have the board then consider anything that was forthcoming? Just to clarify, it was not, yes, if you submit this change, the board will agree to that.
Oh, I understand that.
Right.
But you have reached out and so that you know what steps to take to present to the committee tonight.
So to that point, just to again be very clear, the conversation that was had was with MSBA staff. So ultimately, they indicated, yes, we as staff believe that your request could be entertained by the MSBA Board of Directors, but they couldn't clearly project what the MSBA Board of Directors would say. They could simply say, here's the process if you want to go this route for making this request, and here's the timeline to get it on their docket.
And that's June 27th.
That would be the date that we would need to submit the letter to the MSBA, so that in the August. I'm sorry?
About what's going to happen.
Yes. If we decide to make a change, we would need to submit that by June 27th. If we decide not to make a change, then we would just continue down the path that we're on.
And just Leslie, not having any children or grandchildren or anything in this game, really, it's been a long time. But is the school committee in favor? I would just like to know where the school committee stands. I kind of look towards them as the leaders of this whole project, how they feel about the district-wide version of it. Is that possible?
Well, I can't speak for the committee, but I certainly will speak to the fact that we have not had, or the committee rather, has not had any discussion about this at all. This is the first conversation we've had here. I don't know, Mr. Ragsdale, if you want to at all speak to anything that
well, obviously we haven't been, we can't communicate and didn't give us our public meetings. So, we have been sounding each other out on the issue, and not therefore, and obviously I'm not discussing the same public meeting. I would like to potentially suggest, though, that perhaps we don't need another meeting on the 21st. I think the purpose of this meeting is obvious again, and I think it's well served. If people have asked their questions and maybe their opinions, and that the next step, it seems to me, like literally is the signatures that needed, which falls under the select board and the school committee. I think the select board takes a vote and the school committee takes a vote to authorize Sukazeta, town manager, and school committee chair, or not, which we'll see what the vote is. And it's the reason we have all the stakeholders here is because we think that all everyone's opinion is extremely valid and they can continue to express it. I fully kind of understand and agree with Mr. Hall's idea that we want to all be on the same page and make sure that that we are rowing together as a town and as a community, because it's really so important that everyone is together on this. I don't know if it's necessary. At least would like to throw that.
Just to clarify, the governing body of this would be the school committee, not the select board. The signature comes from the town manager, the superintendent, and the chair of the school committee.
Yes, but Mr. Hall works at the select board and is.
I think that's a fair point, and I certainly would want to have a sense of where the board of the select board sits on this.
Right. The school committee would not ask Mr. Hall to do something that the select board was not comfortable with and agree.
The point of order, the alternate to some of the suggestions and kind of taking out all this, right? So that it would be possible to do this in sequence as opposed to all being together. I don't mind coming. You guys are all fantastic. I love some of that. With how Wilmington and our children. I really appreciate your time here. Look, we can avoid with everyone coming out on the play first and do it in sequence. Or I'm happy to be here again with you. I have no problem doing it. But I can understand the points being made that maybe that's not where the exclusive point of getting three different groups to vote. Could it be done in sequence of the normal meeting we'll have between now and the 21st?
I second that notion. Yeah. Not motioned.
And those, my particular.
Mr. Bray, just a clarification on the Salad's point. And it was a good point. It gets back to what was said that you had offline discussion with MSBA staff. It still has to go to the board. Right now, we're in the queue, so to speak. We're there. And taking a vote to go back still has to go before the MSBA board, which they could, I'm not a gambling man, but they could say, no, look, we all want to start over with you again, right? They could. Okay, as long as everybody realizes that.
But
Could they kick us out altogether? No.
They don't remove us from the program. They will, by default, if you will, and say, thank you for your submission. We have no interest, and therefore, by default, Wilmington is continuing with what we originally agreed to.
Yeah. Unless we opted to not continue at all, but that would be our default. Good.
Think about that. Let's say we submitted, does that stop our current path while that's under review, or does our current path keep going until there's a decision made on the new?
Your current path will stop
about 6 months upon submission. It's upon the
So to that point, though, one of the things I think that should be noted, and again, we're having some discussions prior to really delving into the prospect of looking at other options. We were in the process of establishing a schedule for these visioning sessions, and others can probably speak to it more articulately than I can, but essentially the intention of that was to really draw the public in various ways and explore the three options that were on the table. And what we found as we were trying to schedule these sessions was the reality is that during the summer, we're just not going to get the turnout that we would want for something this important. So we had already talked about, and certainly Superintendent Brand can jump in here, but talked about this prospect that this very important next step visioning was probably not going to be able to start until mid to late September if we wanted to do a legitimate job at it anyways. So even if we were to go stay the course, if you will, that is a crucial next step that we're probably not going to be able to start until mid-September, late September.
Yes, we did push it out, knowing that this visioning process, which is a very, very important piece of literally visioning where we want to go as a community with our educational programs, we want people to be a part of that. We want community members to be a part of that. We want staff to be a part of that. And we know at this time of the year, through no one's fault, we're at a very difficult time of the year, literally, to pull people together. So thinking about waiting until the fall was where we landed. Question, Patrick?
Yes, I'm looking for clarification. I understand that you guys stated that there would be a complete pause if we were to adopt the new portion, but the first two options are the identical of the original. Would you still carry on in doing your enabling, establishing, moving forward with those two, studying those two options?
We would have to request the MSBA to allow us to do that during eligibility. During feasibility, you can do that, but during eligibility, you can't. So we would have to request that the MSBA allow us to be forward with studying those options.
I would highly recommend that, since the first two options are part of the original anyway, in respect to time.
With this, and do more just of the procedural, I guess, heck of us, should we collectively decide to move forward with expanding our options? Refresh my memory of the date that we have to tell the MSBA by. And I ask only because, as we're saying, can we all sort of meet rather than collectively as our own? Do we all have meetings or can fit me in between now and then to make sure we make I know we have a regular year, I'm fairly confident the select board does, but for finance committee, the Wildwood building, can we all make that happen?
We need to submit the letter to the MSBA on June 27th. So our follow-up meeting, we had suggested that we meet back on June 21st, giving us time to create a vote and giving us time to put the narrative together to send to the MSBA.
To Mr. Bailey's question then, so the school committee does have a meeting on the 14th. The other, follow-up. Does the finance committee? I'm sorry?
We are planning one.
Oh, you are planning. Would she be moving, do you think, before the 20? No?
I would expect to first.
And twice. Well, next week was.
John Doherty and I have had conversations about the need to have a finance committee meeting, which typically happens in mid-June anyway. So we haven't locked down a date, but I would expect one would happen between now and the 21st, 22nd.
So is that, I don't know how to manage this, I'll admit, but we have a sense that this is the direction we want to go for the respective boards, or do we need to be more formal than that?
I believe so. I think very concerned. I've been here these very, and these both 3 or 4 positions that you're taking on how we want to design this, and I believe if we get the clarity on that, I think the formula that'll go forward very fast.
So it sounds like the consensus then is that the 4 committees can meet individually and cast a vote at that time. I guess the one group we don't, do we have a meeting with the Wildwood?
The Wildwood Building Committee has been scheduled to meet on June the 21st.
Okay.
Which is the reason we selected the follow-up possible date. So yes, we do. So is it, can we do this through consensus, or do we need an actual motion?
I guess I would just put it, does anybody object to the idea of meeting separately and taking individual board votes?
Yeah. The issue that I had is that personally, is that I'd like to know how the other committees feel. I'd like to know, for example, what the school committee feels. If you guys want to go forward with this and collect them, you know, and the majority, if not collectively, and the finance committee is okay with it. I mean, to me, I think it's, you know, I'd be voting in a vacuum of sorts, because just because I feel one way or the other, I don't know how the school committee feels.
I guess that should, my opinion is I don't think that should matter. I think everybody should just make their decision individually. I mean, I know it's a board, but.
But why would we go against, as an example, why would we go against, say, the school committee and the finance committee?
If I vote, and this is hypothetical, because I'm just saying, because I'm going to vote the way I feel strongly about. So the way they vote is not, I mean, I'll consider it this, if, you know, that's just my opinion. I'm not going to, I'm just saying that if I was going to say no to this and they said yes, and the client and I was in the minority, I'm not going to change my vote if I'm really felt that way. Do you know what I mean? I see your point. You could sit there and say, okay, well, why? And to consider and say, you know what, that makes sense. I'm going to go for it. But that's the way I don't think it makes a difference to me, but I don't know. I'm desk.
Can I just ask a question? So your respective boards are currently meeting on the 12th for your Board of Selectmen meeting is 12th, and your school committee meeting is on the 14th. We have not scheduled a finance committee meeting yet, and we don't have a scheduled.
We do.
21st for Wildwood. Would the Board of Selectmen, the finance committee, and the school committee need to have the OPM and the design team present for your meetings? Would that be helpful, or to ask questions?
Yes,
As long as we just come back once evening, guys. I mean,
why don't you come back on the 21st?
yeah, I know.
I can take all this information, we can digest this, we can come back and we can all settle with all the information that we've been given tonight, and then come back and we can hear each other out. I mean, we're all appointed and elected to make these decisions for the stakeholders in this town. So why don't we all come back, take the 3 weeks, whatever it's going to be, to digest all this and you do it.
I won't be here on 21st. I have a commitment.
I will not pay attention. Don't more say, I don't know if you do Zoom. Bring me about and I think you're going to run into the same problem, not have quorums in certain ones. And
There's nothing to.
Can we take a preliminary vote today or see where each committee is?
Well, the finance committee can't vote today, though.
I know, just get
there.
A preliminary, not necessarily an official. Yeah, but we give a sense.
Yeah, or how about?
Yeah.
I don't have enough to do tonight.
But
I don't have nothing. We just can count us out and just see what everyone else is. We still don't.
So we never got a job.
So they you like
No, it's, I don't know.
if there's a will amongst the other three committees to kind of take a straw vote, I suppose there's no harm in that, or just individually offer your perspective, as opposed to maybe even a formal vote.
Mr. De Palma, the question.
We can take a vote now, not by committee, but by the general ordinance studies, and we would see where we're coming from anyways. Is this why we wouldn't have an issue because of finance or anybody else saying we're not ready to officially. But
maybe the idea would be just to take a collective show of hand, for example, of everybody in the room, regardless of what board you're on. Would you support the idea of expanding the options?
Let's do that. Instead of on why don't you show them?
Yeah.
I looked at and it was leaning. This part expanding the option. Yeah,
We're expanding the options.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
I'm still on record. I'm not against it. I just want more information and I need to digest it. So I'm just not ready over.
Well, thank you for that. So
So with that, then it sounds like, again, there's been a lot of back and forth, but the sense I'm getting is that we've got scheduling conflicts outright that create issues for the 21st as a collective meeting. So it sounds like the better option would be for the committees to individually meet and over the course of the next few weeks here and take your votes independently. And then I guess the question, as Julie posed before, is there a desire amongst one or more of the committees to have SMMA or Zor Whittier present? Was that the question? Yeah. To answer any questions that may come up that night, I guess.
I would. I believe.
Okay, so thank you for your patience as we work through that. A couple of concluding thoughts, unless there are any public comments or any new business, which it just probably there's not. Before we vote to adjourn, then a few concluding things here. First off, we will make sure that the presentation that was shared tonight is distributed to all members of the respective committees. That's number one. Number two, certainly, if members, as you have a chance to digest what again is known to be an awful lot of information, I'm not sure, Mr. Hall, if you want committee members to reach out to you and we can connect and get that to our tier. How would you like to work that?
So I would suggest certainly if members of the select board or finance committee have questions, check in with me, individually, and perhaps the school committee and the Wilmington, the Wildwood School Building Committee can direct questions to you.
Right. And I think unless there's anything else that anyone can think of that we haven't addressed tonight, we will make this recording available, as mentioned, to the community. And, if I may, I think just a concluding thought, Ms. Maselli, your point earlier, I think that is a good one, an important one to think about. And I thought it was interesting how you framed it, but I understand how you do. For those that are in the community listening into all of this, as we make our way through whatever decision is going to be the final one, and we do shift our focus to obviously exploring a school project on one side of town or not, to me, and I'm not speaking for anyone else but myself, I think what will be really important for our community is to recognize that we have to be coming to terms with what an overall plan is for our schools in the future, and somehow coming together to convey what that plan looks like. Because in the absence of that, I fully recognize your points, and one side of town may feel slighted if a building project is not coming their way. And even though that may be the case, it would seem to me, and it's not my position or authority to make, but that as a community, as soon as it's appropriate, where we have a vision for where we're going, we right behind that have a vision for what we're going to do for the rest of the school system, the students and families. Because the worst thing from all of this is that there would be a contingent of our community feeling slighted or not taken care of. So I appreciate you sharing your comments today. Took the liberty if I didn't do that. So with that, thank you again. I know it's been a long evening, a lot of information, but thank you for your patience working through that. With how we started, we'll look to a vote to adjourn by committee, starting with the select board.
Of the to adjourn, happens to all debate of the thing.
I will call.
Item rules, right now, yes. Time for us, yes.
Building is, yes.
Dairy Farm, yes.
Thank you so much. Next, finance committee.
Keep vote.
The school committee.
And we'll share again. Second. On favor?
Roll call.
This man, yes, and this are
Sir.
in there, yes. Jesse Badley, yes. Cypher College, yes. Ed Bryson, Dave Russell, yes.
And oh my gosh, I don't have the list for the Wildwood Building Committee.
This adjourn. Second.
Set.
Thank you.
George Hooper.
Diane Allen.
Craig Minor.
Christine Prendergast.
Ray Gondel, yes.
Kevin Carriers. Paul Nolan, yes.
Yeah,
Holloway.
Mary Ann Galezo, yes.
Did Drysdale, yes.
Susan Nance, yes.
Justin Cruchet, yes.
Forward yearly, it's
And like that. Is Cesalia.
Kate Bissell, yes. Christine Holleran, yes.
Michael Lutio, yes.
Glenn Brand, yes.
Jeff Hall, yes.
Always like to see how the vote's gonna fall before we get these voters. Like Justin.